Arrival. On a bright morning, an elderly black man steps into the grand lobby of an upscale bank. He walks with a steady gait, his posture dignified despite his modest attire, an old but neatly pressed suit. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow on the polished marble floors, reflecting the bank's air of exclusivity. As he approaches the front desk, he takes a deep breath, his warm eyes scanning the room. He has been here before, but today, he is here for an important transaction. However, he quickly notices the looks from the staff, quick glances exchanged between tellers, a dismissive smirk from the manager near the back, and the cold, almost rehearsed politeness in their greetings. Despite the subtle hostility, he remains calm. He has faced far worse in his lifetime. What the bank employees don't know, however, is that today they are about to learn a lesson they will never forget. As the elderly man approaches the teller, he offers a polite smile. "Good morning, young lady," he says, his voice steady yet warm. The young bank teller, a well-dressed woman with an air of impatience, barely looks up. Her eyes scan his suit, neatly pressed but old, and she immediately assumes he must be lost or in the wrong place. "Sir, this is a private bank," she says curtly. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The man chuckles softly. "Yes, I believe I am." He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a bank slip, setting it gently on the counter. The teller barely glances at it before shaking her head. "If you're looking to cash a check, you should try one of the local credit unions," she suggests with a forced smile. A few other employees nearby overhear and smirk. One leans toward another and whispers, "Probably some old janitor thinking he can withdraw a fortune." Despite the humiliation, the elderly man remains composed. He clasps his hands together and looks around, noting the condescending stares. But he is not here to prove anything, at least not yet. Would you like public humiliation? The elderly man patiently waits, but the teller doesn't bother to check his bank slip. Instead, she sighs dramatically and waves over a nearby security guard. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're holding up the line," she says loudly, drawing the attention of other customers. A few chuckles ripple through the lobby as wealthy patrons glance over, some shaking their heads in amusement. The security guard, a tall man with a stern expression, approaches. "Sir, do you even have an account here?" he asks, crossing his arms. The elderly man remains calm, his expression unreadable. "I do," he replies simply. The teller scoffs. "I highly doubt that." She glances at his slip again, this time more for show than for actual verification. "What kind of transaction are you even trying to make?" The old man's lips curl into a small, knowing smile. "A rather large one." The teller bursts into laughter. "Oh, really? And how much are we talking about?" she asks, still mocking him. He leans in slightly. "Enough to make you rethink how you've treated me today." The smirks fade slightly, but the employees and security guards still don't take him seriously. They're about to learn just how wrong they are. "Would you like an image?" The elderly man remains calm, but the bank employees continue to treat him with suspicion. The teller shakes her head, barely hiding her amusement. "Sir, if you're serious about making a large transaction, we'll need proof of your account," she says, her tone dripping with condescension. The old man slides his bank slip closer. "Everything you need is right here." The teller glances at it but doesn't even attempt to verify it. Instead, she looks toward the bank manager, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who has been watching the situation unfold with a smirk. "Mr. Calloway," the teller calls out, waving him over. "This gentleman says he has an account here and wants to make a large transaction." The manager strolls over, adjusting his tie. He barely looks at the elderly man before chuckling. "Sir, I think there's been some confusion. This bank doesn't handle smaller community transactions. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a local credit union?" A few employees stifle laughs, and the security guard remains close, as if ready to escort the man out. Still, the elderly man does not react with anger. Instead, he folds his hands and asks one simple question. "Are you absolutely sure you want to continue treating me this way?" The revelation begins. The bank manager crosses his arms, smirking at the elderly man. "And why wouldn't we treat you this way?" he scoffs. The teller laughs under her breath. The security guard shifts slightly, ready to remove the man at a moment's notice. Other customers glance over, some watching with mild amusement, others with indifference. The elderly man sighs and reaches into his inside coat pocket. Slowly, he pulls out a sleek, leather-bound folder and places it on the counter. I'd like you to take a closer look before you embarrass yourselves further, he says calmly. The manager rolls his eyes but picks up the folder, flipping it open lazily. His smirk lingers until he sees the contents. His face drains of color. The teller leans over, confused, then gasps. The security guard, once so confident, now looks uneasy. Inside the folder are official documents proving something none of them had imagined. The elderly man is not just a customer. He is the majority shareholder of the bank. Would you like an image of this dramatic? The shock of recognition. A heavy silence falls over the bank lobby. The manager, who moments ago had been brimming with arrogance, now looks like he's seen a ghost. His hands tremble slightly as he flips through the documents, confirming the truth over and over again. The teller leans in, eyes wide with disbelief. This can't be real, she mutters under her breath. The security guard, who had been ready to escort the elderly man out, now shifts uncomfortably. He clears his throat but says nothing. Other bank employees stop what they're doing, sensing that something extraordinary is happening. Wealthy customers, who had once chuckled at the elderly man's treatment, now whisper among themselves. The old man remains completely calm. I take it you recognize my name now? He asks the stunned manager. The manager swallows hard, nodding stiffly. Mr. Carter? Aye. His voice cracks, his former smugness completely gone. The elderly man simply clasps his hands together. I suggest you think carefully about your next words, he says evenly. The bank manager struggles to find his words, his face turning pale. He glances again at the documents, then at the elderly man standing before him, unwavering and dignified. Mr. Carter, he stammers, I had no idea. The elderly man raises a hand, silencing him. That much is clear, he says calmly. But the question is, why? Why did you assume I didn't belong here? Why did you mock me before even looking at my credentials? The teller, still wide-eyed, swallows hard. The security guard shifts his weight uncomfortably, suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation. Other employees, once smug and dismissive, now avert their eyes, ashamed. The wealthy customers who had enjoyed the scene earlier whisper among themselves. Some step back, embarrassed by their own silent participation in the humiliation. The elderly man lets the silence linger. Then he speaks again, his voice steady. I built my fortune through decades of hard work, and I invested in this very institution because I believed in fairness and opportunity, he says, locking eyes with the manager. Clearly, that belief was misplaced. The weight of his words settles over the room like a heavy storm cloud. The manager opens his mouth to respond, but for once, he has nothing to say. Would you panic? The weight of the revelation spreads like wildfire through the bank. The once smug employees now fidget nervously, their faces turning red with shame. The manager clears his throat, forcing a weak smile. Mr. Carter, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. If we had known who you were. The elderly man raises an eyebrow. And if I were not who I am? He interrupts. Would you have treated me any differently? The manager swallows hard, unable to answer. The young teller looks down at the counter, avoiding eye contact. The security guard, who had been ready to escort the man out, takes a small step back, his posture stiff with discomfort. The wealthy customers, who had been quietly entertained before, now shift uneasily, some pretending to be deeply interested in their phones or watches. The silence is deafening. Employees glance at one another, searching for a way out of the situation, but there is none. The elderly man exhales slowly. I've built this bank on principles of integrity, respect, and fairness, he says. And yet, it seems those values are not shared by the very people who represent it. The manager's forehead glistens with sweat. Sir, please, let us make this right. The elderly man lifts a hand, signaling that he has heard enough. We'll discuss that in my office, he says firmly. The manager visibly flinches at the words. His office? No, Mr. Carter's office. Would you like an image of this moment of panic? Consequences ensue. The elderly man straightens his posture, his eyes scanning the nervous faces before him. The once arrogant bank employees now stand frozen, awaiting their fate. Mr. Carter turns to the manager. Your actions today were not just about me. They reflect how you treat others. How many more customers have you disrespected because of your own biases? The manager stammers. Sir, I assure you this was a misunderstanding. No, Mr. Carter interrupts. This was a pattern, one that ends today. He looks around the room, then calmly declares, effective immediately, there will be changes in this bank. Discrimination will not be tolerated, not against me, not against anyone. The employees glance at one another in fear. Mr. Carter signals to an assistant who has been waiting nearby. Review the staff. Anyone found mistreating customers, especially due to race or status, will be removed. No exceptions. The teller's face turns pale, and the security guard's posture stiffens. The bank manager, realizing his fate is sealed, lowers his head in defeat. Wealthy customers who once smirked now stand silent, witnessing true power, not the kind that comes from money, but from integrity. Mr. Carter exhales slowly. I will be watching, he says, turning to leave. A lesson learned. As Mr. Carter walks toward the exit, the atmosphere in the bank is completely transformed. The once arrogant employees now stand in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of what just happened. The bank manager, still pale, watches him go, knowing his career may never recover from this moment. Wealthy customers who once chuckled at the elderly man's supposed mistake now look down, ashamed of their own silent complicity. The young teller grips the counter, her hands trembling slightly. The security guard remains motionless, no longer the enforcer, but a witness to a powerful reckoning. At the door, Mr. Carter pauses and looks back. Remember this moment, he says evenly, because next time you won't get a second chance. With that, he steps out, walking into the sunlight with the quiet confidence of a man who knows his worth. Inside the bank, no one speaks. No one moves. The lesson has been learned, and the world inside that grand building will never be the same again.